The Prime Minister is sticking to her guns on one thing. She wants to keep to an arbitrary target plucked out of the air by Dave Cameron, remember him, to get net migration below 100,000 a year. She tried to meet this target when she was Home Secretary and failed miserably. But she's determined to stick to it because she never goes back on her word, does she?
There should be no general election until 2020.
In order to keep to her predecessor's pledge, this country faces the prospect of fruit rotting in the fields, a brain drain, even the prospect of Brits serving our coffees in Pret, totting up to a predicted loss of $6 billion a year, according to the Office of Budget Responsibility, if this mad target's met. $6 billion. This means that taxes will go up and public services will be cut to make sure she meets her aim. The Prime Minister's on track for a stonking majority. It's a good time to bury bad pledges that she'll never be able to fulfil anyway. Getting net migration down to tens of thousands is pie in the sky. It's neither achievable nor desirable and should be quietly dropped from the manifesto.
Rachel, we hear what we should not be doing. What should we be doing? What is the policy? Come one, come all?
Well, you know what the policy is, which is that in order we've left...
She shouldn't put in limits. So what would your policy be? I hear what you don't want to see. What do you want to see?
I want to see the economy having enough people, high-skilled, medium-skilled, low-skilled, in order to sustain the growth rate we have and in order to maintain the budget. If it goes into surplus, the higher immigration is, goes into deficit, the lower it is.
No control.
No, managed immigration. I'm not saying come one, come all, like the mistake that happened when, obviously, Romania and all comers came in.
Who is doing the managing and how is it managed?
It can be managed.
Walk me through that.
If we accept that there is some sort of registration scheme for people who come into this country, as when I lived in Belgium, I had to register with my commune. And when she was Home Secretary, Theresa May actually looked at these sorts of systems, which would have enabled her to keep track on migration, which she allowed to run unchecked, but she dismissed those.
But I still don't see how it's actually going to be managed per se. Who's doing the management? So we'll have
We've
border
already
guards.
got a system where people have visas to work here.
Right.
Non-EU and EU migration is divided, as you know. We do not. When people come into this country, they're not just allowed to stay here indefinitely. As we know, people are having to apply for permanent residency. Now.
Isn't this another example, perhaps, of the different lifestyles that we all enjoy? No, seriously. In that, if you work damn hard and your husband works damn hard and you have a great lifestyle, good luck to you. It's exactly what I want to see. Fantastic, and your kids are doing well. Brilliant, well done. But there will be people watching this whose livelihoods have really been affected. Maybe a plasterer or a carpenter who used to make X a day, well, let's say, used to make 150 quid a day or whatever.
Yes, but
they don't see immigration in the same rose-tinted specs, Rachel. That is the reality.
2 points. I want to look at this debate, if we can, panel, on a really economic level, not on this sort of sense that, migration has put British people out of work, because the evidence on the economy is that this country is at almost full employment.
Yes, you couldn't get much better.
OK, so if Theresa May takes migration down to 100,000 as opposed to 200-whatever thousand, we are going to start racking up a big deficit. We need these workers in the NHS. We need them in business and in tech. Sorry, just one last thing, Carol. Barclays Bank says the need for foreign workers is far more important to the city than passporting will be. It's time to just face up to this.
Surely if we need to bring more people in, we can under a control system. That's the point. We're not shutting the door on anybody. She's saying yes to keep it under, but if we need certain...
I'm afraid that's my point.
The potato pickers who want to go and work, they can come in. They can be registered.
She will have to exclude tens of thousands of skilled workers and low-skilled workers in order to meet this target, this arbitrary target, without the needs of the economy. Greg.
I mean, I think one thing you should do is take overseas students out of the figures, because that's an export. I mean, they're bringing money into this country to go to university. They've actually saved a lot of the universities through the recession by having so many foreign and overseas students, and that should continue, and they should be taken out of the figures. But they shouldn't
overstay their welcome.
They don't.
There is a bit of that.
Well, there's always going to be some who will find a way of staying.
Your point is right.
Yeah, but take those out of the figures. Yeah. I don't think the government has any idea how to control migration. If you look at the figures, they couldn't get the non-European figures down to the sort of target they had, and they don't, because they don't know how to do it. So if you're really going to say this is going to be tens of thousands, you've got to have a plan at the same time for how do you do this? And I also agree with you. I don't think it's economically advisable to do it at all.
Michelle, when I was looking into this, just one thing. The Oxford Migration Observatory said that we actually have very little clue about migration because it's done on the passenger survey of stopping people at random at airports. Plus, we don't have a system of ID cards or registration. So actually, these figures are probably arbitrary as well. So she's sticking to this target when the numbers involved are probably completely inaccurate. But Michelle, what's your take?
My take is I think we're almost confusing two things because we're focusing on number of people and the impacts on the economy and stuff, but I think the focus should be on the skills. So it's not about the number of people, it's about the kind of skills that we need. So when we're talking about, I think you mentioned baristas or something not being here, it's not about we need 10 people from Poland in order to be plasterers or 5 people from wherever in order to be baristas. What we're saying is we have a labour requirement for baristas, which, by the way, baristas, those kind of things will probably be automated in the not-too-distant future anyway, so those skills will be automated. So I think the conversations we need to be having is rather than talking about numbers, we should be talking about what skills does our economy need in order to flourish? What skills do employers need, businesses need? How do we get more entrepreneurs into the country and create jobs? And I think we need to start having conversations from that side instead of how do we only have 5 people in and not one person there and one person there.
So you agree with me that it's stupid to have an arbitrary target rather than... What if it turns out we need 150,000 skilled IT workers?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
What will we do then?
I'm not sure
if we've got a target in our manifesto that says they can't come in.
Confusion reigns here, Rachel. I wonder if I could refer you to my second favourite member of your family.
You saw the figures last year. We had about 333,000 net coming in from around the world, 184,000 from the European Union. That's equivalent to a city the size of Oxford. And that's going to mean huge growth in our population. People are entitled to have a say on that. Now, they've been promised that those numbers will be reduced to the tens of thousands. Clearly, that has not been possible as long as we are members of the EU.
Is the now Foreign Secretary arguing a little bit against what you're saying here?
Well, I'm afraid he's wrong. The problem with the population growth doesn't actually come now. It did when we had the open door policy and we didn't have the transitional stop on those EU countries coming in, and then they flooded in. Do you remember? That kind of growth has stopped. It is going to be managed after Brexit. So the problem with population growth comes from everybody having too many children here, rather than being imported from the EU.
But Rachel, just to touch on you, because you said that I agreed with what you're saying about figures and stuff. I agree with controlled immigration. I do. I believe that there has to be controls around that.
But we don't want to have an economic recession as a result of Theresa May sticking to a target which was plucked out of the air by David Cameron.
Do you think that's a reality?
We're not going to have any... No, because it's
what I really
we would bring more people in. Everybody goes over targets all the time. It's not set in law. If she needs more people, if we need more people to avoid an economic recession, we bring them in.
But if they haven't been able to control the non-Europeans up to now, and the non-Europeans, I think the figure's 150,000.
It's a half and half, yeah.
It's half and half. 150,000 when they promised, to get down 10,000. How are they going to do it in the future?
But they have been controlling.
They can't.
No, they
can't.
The wrong figure.
That's why we had Brexit, in order to control EU immigration.
But what has been going on are the numbers coming in from the EU. The EU, there's 5.3 million non-Brits living in this country, and more than half of those are from the EU, and that is growing.
There are jobs that, if we don't bring in people from overseas, they won't get filled.
And Carol's graduates can do them.
And once you put
But can I just go to Carol's point, which you're right, in a sense, about saying that it was a notional. Having a target on migration is like saying my target weight is, in your case.
Oh, I knew you'd get personal, you see?
What's your target weight?
You gutter journalists always have to get personal like that.
That is your target weight. You're not going to necessarily drop your target weight, but you're not necessarily going to make your target weight, are you, Nick?
No.
Over the course of the next Parliament.
No.
So maybe we've got to accept that she has to say this to placate the right wing, the people who voted for Brexit on the idea that we were going to have managed migration.
It's not just to placate the right wing either. It's to placate people in towns and cities who have been affected by mass immigration.
But they are going to have a problem, aren't they? Because if you put a number and say that's what we're going to do, and then you don't meet it, you're back into the same position again, and that's what's going to happen.
But it
was funny that David Davis himself, lead Brexiteer, said we need migration.
Well,
I rest my case.